Welcome to this meeting this week. And before I formally introduce Dr. Go for today, who is today's featured speaker, just quickly have an intro. As usual, our project has 3 initiatives: neurodiversity, awareness, and education; neurodiversity at work and wellness; and Neurodiversity Independent Living Skills Initiative. And embedded in each initiative are several programs that have been active for the last few years. And I'm not going to tell you too much about them today, but to mention that our annual Stanford Neurodiversity Summit is going to be held in September, and that will be from September 20. Her PhD in 2013 at London's UCL Wellcome Trust Institute of Neurology under Brain Stimulation Lab. She began her fellowship at UC Berkeley's Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab. During her time in the Bay Area, she co-founded Aria Brain Imaging, an AI consciousness research platform, with Dr. Ryota Kanai. She continued to serve as a postdoc fellow in UCL's Applied Cognitive Neuroscience Lab before joining Cognitive Leap in 2017. Crystal also holds a MA in psychological counseling from PAU and is a professional mindfulness teacher trainer with an international student base. Crystal specializes in designing, developing, and implementing mental health technology products for real-world use. Welcome, Crystal, and I'll end the sharing, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fong. We're so excited to be part of this conversation today. So really honored to be part of this. So today we're going to be I'm going to be introducing something called the Hope Focus System. And we call it HFS for short. And it's a revolutionary intervention for ASD children. But I wanted to start off today's talk talking about neurodiversity and what our approach to neurodiversity is, what context we see it in. To give you a summary, I'm going to start off by talking about neurodiversity in underserved communities, which is what Cognitive Leap focuses on right now. And then I want to share a little bit about how we see neurodivergence and what it really means to me from a biological perspective. And then in the part 3, we're going to talk about how we actually utilize this knowledge of what neurodivergence is from a biological level into building HFS, our intervention, and why the therapeutic elements can be linked back to these neurodivergent correlates. And lastly, I'm going to show everyone some pilot intervention data that's very, very positive. So Cognitive Leap focuses on serving underserved communities. Something that we really focus on is accessibility, affordability, and making things available, making solutions available. So I'm really proud to share that in Cognitive Leap, we're a small organization, but we really, really value the traits, and we see a lot of people come into our company because they're very attracted to our philosophy and our attitude towards neurodiversity. In fact, I would say that so many people in our company have traits, or they are parents with children who are neurodiverse. And so we have a community, we have this atmosphere of real acceptance. And when we talk about human-centered AI, this is really how we create it. There's no, we can't compensate that. It really starts from within each individual and then within the company and our attitude towards neurodiversity. So let's look at some recent data of the Chinese-speaking diaspora in the USA. We see that there's a high inflection and increase in the proportion of Asian population in the US. And especially in Chinese immigrants in the Bay Area, we also see this inflection. Looking at the CDC data, we see that prevalence of autism among 8-year-old children in the US has increased significantly, especially for Asian or Pacific Islander children. And this prevalence for underserved racial minority groups is 30% higher in 2020 compared to 2018. Interestingly, there is lacking research or data on autism prevalence in Chinese population in the US. So what we can only do is extrapolate from China's prevalence statistics and also extrapolating from the CDC statistics. But what this is also telling us is that there isn't a lot of interest, even though there is a growing incidence. So now compared to some statistics on language service statistics that are provided by regional centers. And we're looking at California. In this example, we see San Gabriel Regional Center. The utilization for Mandarin Chinese and Cantonese Chinese is much, much, much lower than English and Spanish. And when we look at per capita expenditure for regional centers in terms of these languages, they also rank the lowest. So we see a real contrast in terms of the population increase, but also the resources utilized and expended towards this. Something that we really aim to do is to target this accessibility. When we think about neurodiversity, we cannot really only look at it in a vacuum. I would urge all of us to look at it in the context of other dimensions of intersectionality, other dimensions and identities of privilege and oppression. So here we see an axis of ableism, and neurodiversity would probably fall under ableism and mental health. But every person also holds many other identities. So when we think about the experiences of neurodivergent individuals, they are shaped by also the intersection of their particular neurological differences together compounded with other social identities. So we call this compounded marginalization. I want to draw a typical profile of one of our children who would come to one of our centers in, say, Irvine, Southern California. Maybe they are 8 years old. Parents are new immigrants to California. Oftentimes, maybe they are being taken care of only by one parent. Language barrier becomes a really big issue. Cultural integration becomes a really big issue. Racial issues that they face. And in school and in the environment and in their community, every day they are dealing with these pressures. On top of that, if they are a neurodivergent individual, then this is completely compounded. Sometimes because of the cultural pressure or the stigma, they may not be diagnosed, they may not have sought intervention or treatment. There may be a denial around that. And so sometimes children come to our centers really, really in despair, compounded. Their emotional despair is compounded by these intersectional cultural and social emotional factors. When we look at neurodiversity, we are not only looking at the neurological challenges, not only at the neurodiversity challenges, but the way that they interact with the barriers to adequate care that are experienced by marginalized groups. So on the left, we see these common intervention challenges that whether they are from a marginalized group or not, people may, individuals who are neurodivergent may experience. And on the right, we see that particular to marginalized groups, they have even higher barriers to care. So when we combine these together, we're really looking at individuals who need a lot of understanding of their particular plights and what is happening in their ecosystem that exacerbates their neurodivergent difficulties. And from there, we need to start having these conversations. that is how our approach to human-centered product building comes from. It comes from this larger background of understanding the different layers of social difficulties. Diversity is because their biological correlates are divergent, brain diversity. And so here I really want to say a little bit about the biological correlates of neurodivergence and why this is really important when we think about building novel solutions for autism and also for neurodivergent individuals. When we look at the etiology of NDDs, of course, there is a high comorbidity. On the left, just very simple example of how behavioral phenotypes of ADHD and autism overlap. And also here we see that neurodiversity doesn't only mention or doesn't only include autism, but also a whole spectrum of developmental disorders. Going to be autism, their etiology has a lot of overlap. And when we talk about ASD etiology, there are many different levels of analysis and different levels of therapeutic target that we can look at. So on the genetic and epigenetic, neurobiological, cellular, molecular, environmental, all of these do interact. They're interrelated. For us, we are focusing on the neurobiological level of neurodivergent etiology. So we're looking at what are the differences in structural, organizational, functional connectivity of the brain, neurotransmitter regulation differences. And by recognizing this particular level of ASD etiology, and so familiar levels of etiology, we know that affecting one level of change can lead to bottom-up changes in behavioral and cognitive phenotype. And a lot of the times, when we have patients and clients, they come, that is mostly what they are really caring about.